इंडियन एक्सप्रेस हमें शब्द आता है पढ़ने के लिए। चलो कोई बात नहीं, अब हिंदू की बातें करते हैं। हम हिंदू हैं यार, ऐसे क्या
रिकॉर्डिंग नहीं करनी है।
लाइव चलेगा ना? ये चल रहा है लाइव, ऑन है तो फिर लाइव क्यों कर दिया, स्टार्ट क्यों कर दिया पहले ही? चलो ठीक है, ओके फाइन। So hello everybody, welcome back to Edu for IAS, the Hindu analysis. And today, from today onwards, we are starting, we'll be continuing, fine, the Hindu analysis, and it will be a regular affair, fine. So stay tuned with us, Edu for IAS, for daily update related to the Hindu analysis, fine. So today, if you see, whenever we open the newspaper, the first page is very important, and we need to know that that what to read, and what to read for UPSC particularly will be aware of this, or will be knowing from the syllabus part, fine, the GS syllabus particularly, that what to read. So now on the first page, let us start with the first page only, then we will be moving page wise. So let us start with the first page. Now see, this is the first page of the Hindu, 1st of June, today's paper, fine. So what seems important here? The very important component, the very important thing which you find over this page, the first page, the front page you can say, is that GDP of India, GDP expanded 6.1% in 2020 and 23 last quarters. Means when we are talking about 2022 and 23 last quarter, some things need to be cleared in the first place. First is, it means we are talking about financial year 23 and not 22, remember, okay? Like for example, this year's Honorable Finance Minister presented the budget for the year, yes, 2023 and 24, means we are talking about the financial year 24 and not 23. This is the financial 2023, means the year 2022 and 23 from 1st of April 2022 to 31st March 2023 is your financial year 23, fine. So here the story is that GDP of India expanded 6.1%, बढ़ी है हमारी GDP कितने से? 6.1 से in 2022-23 last quarter. So we know that there are 4 quarters in any year, एक साल में 4 quarters होते हैं, right? So we are talking about the last quarter. Last quarter means from January to March, Jan-Feb March 2023, fine. Okay, so what are the reasons, what are the other things, what are the technicalities, we will be taking up one by one. So what is saying that full year manufacturing GVA, gross value added. Now here there are two terms, so conceptual clarity needs to be there, and this will come from your either GS3 or the Indian economic classes, of course GS3. So there we need to be clear, have clarity about the difference between GDP and GVA. When you talk about GVA, let me tell you in one lines both the things. So when you talk about GVA, means gross value added, means what value the different sectors of your economy is adding to the economy, adding to the overall economic, fine. Like for example, primary sector, secondary sector, tertiary sector, fine. So all these three sectors in alongside the allied sectors, how much value they are adding to the overall economy. So we call it GVA, gross is total value added, so total value added from different sectors. Now GDP is the final value of all the final goods and services that we produce in a accounting year or financial year, fine. So that is different, and for computing GDP there are different methods, expenditure methods, product method, fine. So there are 2-3 methods as well. So first we need to have clarity about, while reading this thing, we need to be very much clear about the distinction between the GDP and the GVA, need not to confuse ourselves, fine. Moving ahead, full year manufacturing GVA slid to 1.3% from 11%. So remember, for sustainable employment and growth of any economy, particularly let us talk about India, it's very important or preemptive that manufacturing growth should not slide, rather should increase and should always be in an expanding zone, fine. it should be the opposite scenario, that from 1.3% it expanded to 11.1%. Fine. So somewhere this thing is not good for us. Full year manufacturing GVA in particular we are talking about. When we are talking about secondary sector, here we are in particularly or specifically talking about the manufacturing GVA only. Fine, because in secondary sector we have manufacturing sector alongside certain other sectors like construction and all. So of course we are particularly focusing on manufacturing. That, but for full year, that is 2022 and 23, since we have the figure for last quarter, so when you are having the figures for last quarter means of course we will be having the figures for whole year. Fine, this is the final quarter of that year 2022-23. So that's why full year manufacturing GVA slid to 1.3% from 11%. Now see, this is not a good thing. Fine, only 3 of 8 sectors, like we have 8 core sectors. So out of those 8 core sectors, only 3 sectors including no, here the sectors are not related to core 1 because including farming and services all. So so this is not related to the core sectors. Remember, these are related to the sectors in general. I mean, they are talking about the 8 sectors in general, and out of those 8 sectors they are saying that only 3 sectors out of these 8 sectors including farming and services recorded higher GVA for financial year 23, because we have already seen in the first line that GVA for manufacturing has been slid to how much? 1.3% from 11%. That's a huge slide, you can say, 11 to 1.3. Fine. So of course, so positive growth we see only for the farming sector and services sector in terms of GVA growth, but we see negative growth or contraction in the growth with respect to the manufacturing sector. Fine. I hope this much is clear from here. Despite Q4 uptick, consumption remains tepid. So remember, generally we say that Indian economy, the nature of Indian economy is such that here our economy is driven by public, investment and private consumption. So private consumption, when I am referring to as consumption at an individual level, which basically propels the economic demand in the economy. So consumption remains tepid. So this is again a major point for us, that consumption has been tepid here. Okay, fine. So this much I hope clear. Now let us further delve in this in detail. So further few more additional informations. So slow expansion is there, but it is a gradual, slow. Fine. India's quarterly gross domestic product growth accelerated to 6.1% in the first 3 months of 2023, that is the last quarter of financial year 2023, from 4.5% in the preceding quarter, while yearly economic growth. So remember, it means that the third quarter of the fiscal financial year 2023 has registered growth of around 4.5%. Fine, and this year has registered growth of 6.1%. So if you compare in terms of quarter to quarter basis, on quarter to quarter basis, so with the respect to the preceding quarter, so of course we have registered net positive growth. Okay, while yearly economic growth for 2022 and 23 was 7.2% compared with 9.1% in 2021-22. So see, in just 4 lines you are getting lots of data and facts, and that is authentic ones, because it has been released by none but National Statistical Office under Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, MOSPI. Fine. This is the most authentic source, because our national income is released by NSO, National Statistical Organization, fine, or office. Okay, so lots of facts and the authentic ones. So what is major change here? That in 2022 and 23, our economy for the full year has registered growth of 7.2% compared to the full year's growth of 2021 and 22, that is the preceding financial year. For 22, you can say in financial year 2022 we registered net growth of 9.1%, but in this year's financial year 23 we have registered net growth of how much? 7.2% only. Fine, though it's a positive growth, but compared to the previous year it is lesser, from 9.1 to 7.2. Still, if India continues to grow as has been forecasted by predicted by RBI and even mentioned in the economic survey, even by 6.5%, or this is exceptional ones 9 point and 7.2. Anywhere if we are growing 7 plus, that would be a major achievement for us. If we keep on growing for coming years, let us say till 2030, if we are maintaining this rate, then of course this would be a miraculous years for us, moving forward. So this is the very, very important facts, figures and the concepts as well. Concepts here are GDP, GVA and fine. So keep in mind these all things. We have already covered this much. I think as far as your farming and services concerned, of course, Indian economy is majorly driven by, if you see the major share of India's, Indian economic growth or overall GDP is the contribution which comes from the services sector. This is services led economy, fine. So and farming sector, if you have consistent or you keeping tap on this, so you might have, you might be aware of this fact that farming is the only sector, agriculture is the only sector which registered positive growth, registering positive growth from the last 6-7 years, and the aggregate average growth has been somewhere around 4.6%, and more than even for the previous 2-3 years it has been around 6.4%. So of course, even during the pandemic, the worst years that we experienced for the economy, because where the world's economy contracted, including the India's, even during that period, the only upshot was the farming sector, which registered net positive growth, fine, which itself has a very much positive impact, which has been and which is leading to or boosting our exports as well, fine, particularly of agricultural commodities, fine. Okay, moving ahead, these things has been further mentioned under this. We have covered the major things here. If you want to further read it down, I mean there is not a much thing, just the figure that you need to remember is this much is sufficient for any exam, fine. Not need to remember every quarter's figure, that would be too much, fine. Need not to be bombarded with the facts, this much of facts. Just keep in mind, because in economy we have lots of data and facts, that what we need to store here is more important, fine, and these are the figures that we need to give here and not the whole each quarter's figure, fine. Okay, moving ahead, further in this farm and service growth we have already covered. Now see, revised GDP and GVA, this is important now. So what is the revision, what is the major change from the previous years? So we'll see that even in this map, if you see July 2020, see the contraction, then further July 2021 and March 2023, 6.1% of growth. So see, this is how the GDP figure is basically, or trend line is basically behaving with respect to the Indian economy. If this is a 0, downward the negative, this zone showing the contraction basically, and above 0 showing the what? Expansion, fine. So this is expansion, this is expansion, but this has been contraction. We are all aware of this thing during the pandemic years. Okay, so moving ahead, what are the major changes in the or major revision in the figures? So let us see. This is important one. Okay, so NSO also revised GDP and GVA numbers lower for the first half of last year, but bumped up the third quarter figures slightly. So it is saying that because this revision is a regular affair, the way NSO collects data and the authentic data source gets the authentic data, so it keeps on revising in order to reach the most authentic figure, fine, and that's a good thing. So of course, so it's saying that NSO on revising GDP and GVA numbers, it has revised it for lower, you can say on the lower sides for the first half of the last year, means first 2 quarters. First half means 6 months covering the 2 quarters, fine. April, May, June and July, August, September, the 2 quarters of financial year 2023, means we are talking about this 6 months of 2022, fine, in which it has revised it on the lower side, but it has bumped up the third quarter figures slightly. बट तीसरे क्वार्टर की फिगर को थोड़ा बढ़ाया है, ठीक है। द फर्स्ट क्वार्टर जीडीपी ग्रोथ इन 2022-23 इज नाउ pegged at 13.1%, you see, and followed by 6.2% rise in the second quarter and 4.5% growth in the third quarter, higher than the 4.4%. So just 0.1% revision upward here, ठीक है। In GVA terms, you see the final 3 months of 2022-23 recorded a 3 quarters high of 6.5%. So GDP growth has been 6.1%, but GVA growth has been 6.5%. Okay, the final quarters we are talking about 3 months of the 2022. Final 3 months means last quarter of the financial year 2023. Fine. So this is the variation. GVA is has registered growth of 6.5%, while your as far as quarterly GDP की हम बात करें, so in the same quarter of the last quarters of the financial year 2023, we have GDP growth of 6.1%, while GVA growth of 6.5%. So again, this is conceptual difference. That's why we see the different figures. Fine. So keep in mind this thing. 6.1% of GDP growth. Okay, 6.1%. Fine. Okay, moving ahead. Let us move to the next pages. So here these are the local pages. You don't find much here to as far as our exam is concerned. Fine. And remember one thing, we need to focus on the polity part. That is important for exam, not the politics. You can see all this. Okay, that's why I'm moving to the next pages. This is how we need to go through the newspapers. That's why I'm showing you page wise, so that you have the clarity that what exactly to read and what not to read. So 9 years of BJP rule dedicated to welfare, good governance. You need to check it out. What are the welfare measures there? What are the good governance steps taken by the government of India? What are the initiatives, and how these are leading credence to the what Prime Minister has said. Fine. Not to go into the politics, but just focus on the polity and governance aspect of these statements. Fine. Center is in no hurry to go ahead with the delimitation of constituencies. So nothing more is important from here than the clarity that what exactly is the delimitation of constituencies. Fine. Like Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir में अभी हो चुका है. So this is what we need to keep tap on. Fine. Okay. Further moving ahead. One important, a very important articles today has been covered on the editorial pages of this newspaper. So let us start with the first, and the first is related to the parliamentary versus executive democracy. That is very, very important from the exam point of view. So it comes under GS2. You need to remember that which topics comes under which GS 1, 2, 3, 4. Fine. So it has been written by Gautam Bhatia, Delhi based lawyer. So let us focus on this aspect, this article, which is very important for from exam point of view. You might be asked to just differentiate between parliamentary democracy versus an executive democracy. Fine. Okay. So let us start. 2 words very important for us: parliamentary or an executive democracy. Okay, so let us see what he is saying. We need not to, I mean, it's not like that we are sticking with what he is saying, or this is his thoughts. I mean, what he has written. We may vary. We may you can say our view may be in sync with him or may be different. So we need to check it out. But our view should be neutral one as far as the UPSC is concerned. And of course, after reading all this, we need to think for a few minutes that whether what the author has said is totally correct or not, or if something wrong, then where the things could be improved. Fine. Or what you think and what the constitution says. Okay. So do cross verify the things. Okay. So let us start. The topic is, keep in mind, parliamentary democracy versus executive democracy. So whenever we are reading an article, we need to keep in mind the topic, so that throughout reading throughout these articles or the lines, we would be able to distinguish that what exactly is parliamentary democracy and executive democracy, and where the writers is talking about these two things separately. Fine? Okay. So last week what happened, we are all aware of new parliament inauguration and the symbol of Sengol. Sengol represents the transfer of power basically. Fine. So historically, at the time of independence, even Lord Mountbatten asked the then first Prime Minister of India, Jawaharlal Nehru, if you have any kind of such ceremonial symbolism, or you can say such anything which is related to India, which signifies the transfers of power. So of course, Siraji Gopalachari, the then first and the last Governor General of India, you can say the Indian who was first and last Governor General. So of course, he suggested for Sengol. Fine. And Sengol is what? It's a sceptre originally used to signify the transfer of power between Chola rulers. So this is very, very important. This is somewhere related to ancient history, and of course particularly the Chola rulers of the Chola kingdom. Okay, so it generated significant debate. Submerged beneath this debate, however, is an overlooked fact. So it has of course generated lots of debate, but he is focusing on something else, that submerged is isme daba hua, you can say something was an important fact, and that was the increasing subordination of the parliament in India's parliamentary democracy. Okay, so we all know that we have parliamentary democracy. This is what we have borrowed from UK. You can say we are following the same system of parliamentary democracy that UK has today. Fine, but with little bit variation, which is suited to our tradition, you can say, or which is best suited to the India's of course democracy. So parts of this story are familiar. We know that bills are passed with minimal or no deliberation. We know that parliament sits for fewer and fewer days in a year. We are aware of all these facts. Parliamentary sessions are often adjourned, okay, and we know that the presidential ordinances, president here is important concept, that president can issue ordinance under article 1, 2, 3 of the Indian Constitution. Fine. Okay. So it has, he is saying that ordinances have become parallel if not dominant. Okay, parallel if not dominant. Now from here on, you can get the question, the same framing, that presidential ordinances have become a parallel if not dominant form of law making. Critically analyze this statement. This is how the questions are generally being formed. Fine. So from here onwards, you can find a question for GS. Fine. Okay. So now first of all, he is focusing on the constitutional design, that what exactly constitution talks about all such things. Fine, parliamentary democracy. And then he is through 4 questions he is further explaining the type of transition from parliamentary to the executive democracy, that what led to through his 4 questions and 4 answers, supplementing his 4 arguments with the further 4 supplementary piece of arguments. Okay, so let us see, go one by one. By constitutional design, it is tempting to attribute all of this to unscrupulous or callous. Let us say what that misses, however, is the understanding that the growing irrelevance of parliament is not because of individual actions, but a matter of constitutional design. So whatever we have noticed above, that it has led to you see now fewer and fewer sessions in the houses, and the quality of debate has been deteriorated, or lesser number of sittings. So all of this, he is saying this is not because of any individual actions, but it's a matter of constitutional design. Means he is saying these all things has been there in the constitution. Means he is saying that if some things like this happening, it is because of the constitutional design and not because of any particular individual. Keep in mind this thing. In other words, the Indian Constitution by its very structure facilitates and enables the marginalization of parliament. Now again a question. Again there could be a question that does Indian constitution by design or by structure facilitates and enables the marginalization of parliament? Critically analyze. Again a question. And the concentration of power within a dominant executive. So he is saying that if executive is dominating today, it's not the, we cannot blame it for, exercising the power or dominating, but it is inherent in the constitutional design itself. Focus here. Okay. So how does this happen? How does this happen means how this constitutional design or how this constitutional design enables or facilitates the marginalization of parliament. This is a very important question here. Now he is addressing these four or giving the argument, this justified arguments that how this could happen. So okay, consider the various safeguards that parliament democracies generally tend to put in place against executive dominance or abuse. So he is supplementing his, or he is justifying his this piece of article through further, you can say, parliamentary, the safeguards which has been mentioned in our parliamentary democracy or conduct of houses. So he is using those things. So there are four things here. First is, in order to enact its agenda, the executive must command a majority in parliament. You see. So he is saying that constitution by design, if he is saying the majority, is mandatory, means constitution itself had designed or given the opportunity to the executive to dominate. Fine. This is the first thing. So this opens up the space for intra-party dissent and an important role for ruling party parliamentarians who are not members of the cabinet to exercise a check over the executive. Okay. So he is saying that the executive must command a majority in parliament. So whenever a single party has a majority, so those members of parliament of that party which who are not the part of the cabinet has this rights to put the checks on the actions of the government by by exercising a check over the executive. By exercising their rights, they can put a check over the executive. But this is happening. I mean, the same party, same MPs of same party can put the check over their own government. This is a question. Okay, so occasionally what happens, ruling party backbenchers can even join forces with the opposition to defeat unpopular bills, as has been happened in the UK House of Commons. ठीक है, so this has been exampled. He has given the example कि ऐसा होता है UK के हाउस में, हाउस ऑफ during, and this has happened during the Brexit कि opposition जो मेंबर्स हैं उसके साथ इन्होंने जो रूलिंग पार्टी के मेंबर्स हैं इन्होंने उनको सपोर्ट किया हो इन ब्रेक्सिट डील. फाइन. सो इज इट हैपनिंग इन इंडिया? ऑफ कोर्स द क्वेश्चन इज नो. सेकंड, the opposition itself is granted certain rights in parliament and certain limited control over parliamentary proceedings in order to publicly hold the executive to account. So here in second point he is talking about the role of opposition. Third point, the interest of parliament against the executive are meant to be represented by the speaker. In third point, he is focusing on the role of a speaker. And in the fourth and the last point, in the fourth and the last point, certain parliamentary democracies embrace bicameralism. So here he is focusing on the role of upper houses, that is Rajya Sabha. Fine. So these are the 4 points, remember. Now moving to that how he is supplementing these 4 lines of point of arguments through the further 4 points of justification. So let us see one by one. Okay. So a dilution, erasure, a dilution in India. First, the possibility of intra-party dissent within the parliament has been stamped out by virtue of the 10th schedule to the constitution, popularly known as anti-defection, which was amended or which came in through 10th schedule in the year 1985. So he is saying that possibility of intra-party dissent जो है, that is ruling members, MPs, dissenting against their own this government has been stamped out by this 10th schedule. First one. Second, right from its inception, the Indian constitution did not carve out any specific space for the political opposition in the house. So again he is saying that the issue is with the constitutional design, and since its inception there is no in a specific space for the political opposition in the house. So there is no equivalent, for example, of prime minister questions. Like in the US, you have seen Rishi Sunak giving answers to the questions posed by this leader of opposition in the UK House. So this is not, there is not something, the same thing, in India's constitutional design. Third point, he is saying this is exacerbated by the fact that the speaker in our system is not independent. Of course, so he is now, putting question or supplementing his line of the first argument, the role of a speaker, that in our country the speaker is not independent. Fine, that's one case again. Okay, so next point, next and the last point he is covering is about, okay, the fourth point of course was related to Raj Sabha. So the role of upper house, fourth. The role of the upper house is undercut not only by the speaker's miscalculation of the bills but also by the constitutionally sanctioned ordinance making power of the president. Okay, so he is saying even in India's, the role of upper house, the Raj Sabha, has been undercut by the two things: the role of speaker, especially with respect to the money bills, and the secondly, the ordinance making power of the president. Fine. Okay. So he is saying that if we put all these together, these 4 points and 4 answers, you can say when the executive wants to bypass the upper house altogether, at least for a period of time, and create a fait accompli. So of course, fait accompli is something which which has already been happened and cannot be changed over time. So he is saying this has been scenario as usual since inception. So this is constitutionally designed. Now he is focusing on further on the majority role. So when there is a single majority ruling party, whether at the center, in the states, or there is very little that parliament can do, the anti-defection law wipes out intra-party dissent. Again, the political opposition's scope for participation depends upon the discretion of the executive, fine, and partition speakers further ensures that the executive is insulated from public embarrassment of the hands of opposition. So again, he is putting question over the role of speakers. Okay. Now he is wondering that how then the quality of debates or parliamentary deliberation has declined. It is simply a mirror of parliament's own structural marginalization under the constitution. Instead, what we have is greater and greater executive power, a situation that resembles presidential system. Again, a very important question: prime minister versus presidential setup of kind of government, with a strong executive but without checks and balances. Okay, further, therefore, even as the new parliament is inaugurated, the urgent question that we must ask is whether in formal terms India can continue to be called a parliamentary democracy, or whether we have gradually morphed into an executive democracy. Again, a very important question here. And if indeed we want to return to parliamentarism, what manners of constitutional changes and reforms that it would require. So here we need constitutional changes and reforms that has been inherently built under our constitutional design, which gives executive the upper hand over the. So of course this what all in nutshell we can conclude is, he is saying that if executive is dominating, and if you have seen rising of this majoritarian rule, or you can say executive dominance, parliamentary democracy or executive democracy, if we are seeing today this executive democracy, so it's not because of the dominance of one party rule or majority rule, but it's because of the constitutional design. The issue is with the constitution itself. That needs to be changed, that needs to be reformed. Okay, so it's a very good piece of article. You must read and understand this. Now moving to the next few important things, because we have a paucity of time today. We'll start earlier from tomorrow. Fine. So let us, I'm giving you a snapshot of the important, there are even one to few more important editorials there. So, okay, moving ahead, few more important things here. Okay, these are the important things. Page number 15 now. Okay, so what are the important things? Nepal's PM to hold talks with Modi today, Prime Minister of India, likely to sign pacts on energy and trade. Now this is very, very important as far as GS2 is concerned, that is India's and neighboring relations. So India and Nepal ki relation kya hai, and we need to keep on tap this thing, that what pacts are being signed under this, bilateral mate. So we need to keep tap on this, and whatever would be the outcomes, we'll be discussing the same. Fine. This is just a piece of news, not the crude, relevant information for us. Fine. So we'll be focusing on this thing once they discuss the things or they are coming up with the bilateral, outcomes. So Jaishankar to meet Lavrov keen during BRICS summit. So again, important news. Our external affairs minister has left for South Africa, a long visit to South Africa and Namibia, where he would be attending the BRICS foreign ministers meeting. Fine. This is a preparing ground for this August BRICS summit. To expand the groupings, focus is on expanding the groupings and discuss BRICS current currency seen as a counter to the US dollar. Now this is very important, that BRICS is contemplating to bring a currency which could be seen as a counter to the US dollar. You know what kind of relation today we have with the US. So how US would reply to this thing, we need to keep in mind, take into account. Fine. So again, it's a news. Further, we'll be keeping tab on their outcomes. Moving ahead. Okay. Okay, this piece of information is again important. The world's largest food grains, the world's largest grain storage plan centered to implement pilot projects in 10 districts. This is very, very important piece of information for us. So let us give few minutes to this. So Indian cabinet on Wednesday approved constitutional empowerment, approved the constitution and empowerment of interministerial committee for facilitation of world's largest grain storage plan in cooperative sector. It is saying cooperative sector. So by here the hint is if related to cooperative sector interministerial committee government is talking about, so it will be headed by whom? Of course, more chances is by cooperative Minister of Cooperation, and Minister of Cooperation is who? So let us check it out. So Minister of Cooperation Amit Shah ji, the committee will be chaired by Cooperative and Home Minister Amit Shah. Of course, because here we are talking about cooperative sector. By various convergence of various schemes of the Ministry of Agriculture, Farmers Welfare, Consumer Affairs, Food and Public Distribution and Food Processing Industry. So this is very, very important thing. Fine. An important outcome, keep in mind, chaired by our Honorable Minister of Cooperation Amit Shah. Interministerial Committee. Fine. Okay. Again, risk to 6.5% growth goal more evenly balanced now. It is, our this Chief Economic Advisor V. Anant Nageshwaran has said that risk to 6.5% growth goal more evenly balanced now. It has been balanced out. So what are the factors? Sustained growth, more momentum across sectors. We have seen on the first page sustained growth quarter by quarter, along with the rising private investment and public capital expenditure, offering buffer against external risk. So these are the factors which will be having the positive net impact on the India's overall economic growth. This is what has been said by our Chief Economic Advisor V. Anant Nageshwaran. Fine. So keep in mind again these factors, just 2 lines of information, very, very important. You can quote in your exam as it is, because these are the factors which are lending credence or which is showing the macroeconomic fundamentals of India, and therefore we can expect net positive growth in the coming future. Fine. So that's what. So we'll be stopping here as far as today's Hindu analysis is concerned. From tomorrow we'll be continuing the same. Okay. Stay tuned to the Edu4IAS. Thank you so much for joining our this analysis lecture. So I'll be continuing or carrying on from tomorrow at the same time. Okay. We'll be keeping it at 10:15 somewhere. Fine. So thank you. Take care.